There is a moment in every true transformation that passes quietly without witnesses, without applause, without even your own conscious recognition. It happens while you are still inside the struggle, still pushing through density, through resistance, through the crushing sensation that life has narrowed into nothing but pressure. You are moving forward because stopping feels impossible, not because you are confident or certain. And then almost imperceptibly, something changes. There is no announcement, no dramatic release. You simply realize one ordinary moment that you are breathing differently. The weight has not vanished. The circumstances have not magically rearranged themselves. Yet somehow, you are no longer collapsing beneath what once felt unbearable. This does not happen by accident. You are here because something inside you has already shifted at a depth words rarely reach. Whether you have named it yet or not, whether you have allowed yourself to trust it or not, you have crossed a threshold that most people never even find the courage to approach. The mind loves dramatic markers, finish lines, victories, clear before and after moments. But real transformation does not announce itself that way. It arrives quietly, disguised as endurance, as persistence, as the simple act of continuing when everything inside you once insisted you could not. Here's what sounds impossible, but is absolutely true. The mountain you have been staring at for so long, convinced it would break you, convinced you would never reach the other side, is no longer in front of you. You are already standing on its far slope. The internal battle you believed would never end, the version of yourself you were terrified you would never have the strength to become, the leap you thought you could not survive, you have already lived through it. It is done. You did it. You walked through a fire that should have consumed you, and somehow, against all expectations, you kept moving. Your feet never stopped, even when every cell in your body was screaming for you to collapse. What makes this moment so strange and so easy to miss? As no one really explains how real transformation works. Most people do not recognize the instant they move beyond their breaking point. They are so conditioned to scan for danger, so trained by past pain to anticipate the next collapse, that they overlook the quiet miracle of their own evolution. They remain braced for impact long after the impact has already passed. They are waiting for proof that they are safe, waiting for the next threat, waiting for confirmation that the ground beneath them will hold, and in doing so, they miss the subtle shift where pain begins to alchemize into something entirely different. Not just strength, but a kind of cellular wisdom. A knowing that does not live in your thoughts or affirmations, but in your bones. A certainty that does not shout or boast, but simply exists. It is the quiet understanding that no matter what arrives next, you possess the capacity to meet it. Something happens in the nervous system when you have genuinely moved through enough. Your body stops interpreting every challenge as an existential threat. Your mind grows tired of constructing elaborate catastrophe narratives because you have already lived through some of your worst-case scenarios and discovered something radical on the other side of them. You are still here. You are still breathing. And more than that, you are no longer just surviving. You are expanding in places you did not even know could expand, growing stronger in dimensions of yourself you had never accessed before. If you look around at the external landscape of your life right now, you might think nothing significant has changed. The responsibilities may look the same. The relationships may appear familiar. The daily rhythms might still follow patterns you recognize. But something fundamental has shifted, and it changes everything. It is in the way your nervous system responds when pressure arrives. It is in the way you rest at night without your mind spiraling endlessly through imagined futures. It is in your ability to sit in stillness without immediately needing to fix, prove, explain, or perform. There is more space inside you now, more room to breathe, more room to be. The hardest part of this journey was never about becoming fearless, flawless, or permanently certain. The hardest part was learning to trust yourself at a level most people never access. Not trusting that you would always choose perfectly or never feel terror or never stumble again, but trusting that you could feel terror and still take the next step. trusting that you could stumble and still rise, trusting that you could be imperfect, messy, and deeply human, and still be worthy of beautiful things arriving in your life. That kind of trust cannot be manufactured in a single moment of insight. It is forged through thousands of micro decisions where you chose your own truth over your conditioning. For years, maybe decades, you have been carrying a narrative about yourself, a story that whispered or sometimes shouted that you lacked what was necessary, not strong enough, not brave enough, not worthy enough for the life you secretly longed to live. Somewhere along the way, so quietly you almost missed it, that story began to fracture. Not because someone convinced you it was false, not because you read the right book or heard the right words, but because your own lived experience kept contradicting it. Your actions became the evidence that the old story was never accurate. It was simply the only story you had language for at the time. Every time you showed up when every part of you wanted to hide, every time you said no when yes would have been easier, every time you chose truth over comfort expansion, over safety authenticity, over the approval of people who never really saw you. These were not small moments. They were acts of quiet revolution happening at the cellular level. They have been slowly, patiently rewiring the deepest architecture of who you are. They have been building undeniable proof that the story about your limitations was never the truth. It was just the only version of yourself you knew how to inhabit back then. Now you know something different. Not because someone taught it to you in a seminar, or because you intellectually agreed with it after reading it on a page. You know it because you have lived it. You know what it feels like to be genuinely proud of yourself. Not proud of achievements or recognition, but proud of the quality of your character. Proud of how you moved through something impossibly difficult with integrity. Proud of how you stayed aligned with yourself when pretending would have been easier. Proud of how you kept your heart open even after it had been broken. That pride is not ego. It is recognition. Recognition of your capacity. Recognition of your evolution. Recognition that you have become someone who can be trusted with the weight and beauty of their own existence. And once you cross that threshold, once you know in the marrow of your bones that you can navigate whatever life places in your path, your entire reality begins to shift. The anxiety that once kept you awake at night starts to quiet, not because uncertainty disappears, but because you are no longer trying to control outcomes that were never yours to control. Your attention turns to what you actually have influence over: how you show up, how you respond, how you choose to move through the field of your life. Relationships that once drained you begin to feel different because you are no longer starving for external validation. You are rooted in your own inherent worth. Decisions that once paralyzed you grow clearer because you are no longer asking what others expect or what you think you should do. You are asking what feels true, what feels aligned, what feels like it is emerging from the most honest part of you. This is what it looks like when someone has genuinely moved beyond the hardest part. Not because life becomes easy, but because you become someone who does not require ease in order to thrive. You learn to find meaning in challenge, beauty in uncertainty, and strength in vulnerability. You understand that your power has never been about avoiding difficulty. It has always been about how you meet it. And here's the most beautiful truth about where you are standing. Now, this is only the beginning. You are no longer constructing a life around avoiding pain. You are building one around embracing your full capacity, your complete range, everything you are capable of becoming. That shift, quiet, internal, and profoundly radical, changes what becomes possible for you in ways you may not yet be able to imagine. There is a phenomenon in nature that mirrors what is happening inside you. When a tree is struck by lightning, burned, or damaged in ways that should destroy it, something remarkable can occur. Instead of dying, the tree sometimes grows stronger around the wound. The scar becomes part of its structure. The damage alters the way nutrients flow, the way roots anchor, the way branches reach for light. The tree is never the same, but it is not weaker. It is more resilient, more grounded, more uniquely itself. You are like that tree now, marked by what you have survived, shaped by what you have endured, stronger because you did not break when everything suggested you should have. The scar is not evidence of failure. It is proof of adaptation, proof of life, proof that you can be trusted to keep growing no matter what storms pass through your field. The tree doesn't merely survive the strike. It doesn't just seal the wound and return to what it was before. In response to trauma, it develops what biologists call reaction, wood tissue that is denser, stronger, and more resilient than the original structure. The damage does not weaken the tree. It reorganizes it. The stress creates an internal architecture capable of withstanding storms that would have once been catastrophic. The tree is never the same, but it is more capable, more grounded, more alive. You are that tree. Every challenge you have faced, every moment that should have broken you, but didn't, has been creating reaction wood in your consciousness. You are not simply healed, you are reinforced. Your system has adapted. Your inner structure has changed in ways that cannot be undone. And this is the part most people misunderstand about transformation. They imagine it as a return, a restoration to some earlier version of themselves, lighter, more innocent, less complicated. They think healing means going back to who they were before life hurt them. But consciousness does not evolve by reversing itself. You don't go back. You can't. What you've lived has restructured you at a depth most people never touch. The person you were before the fire no longer exists. And that is not a tragedy. It is an emergence. You have become someone who carries wisdom in their cells. Someone who knows things that cannot be taught, only lived. Knowledge that doesn't need to announce itself because it quietly informs how you move, how you listen, how you choose. At some point, you begin to notice that you are operating on a different frequency. Not because you decided to, but because it's simply happening. Conversations start going deeper without effort or force. You find yourself uninterested in surface-level exchanges that once filled your time. Opportunities that arrive begin to match who you actually are, rather than who you thought you needed to perform as. The energy you bring to your days feels sustainable instead of strained, authentic instead of manufactured. You're no longer burning yourself out, trying to prove your worth. You're inhabiting it. But there is something few people talk about, something no one really prepares you for. When you have genuinely moved beyond the hardest part, when you've built an unshakable foundation inside yourself, some people in your orbit won't know what to do with the new you. They will keep expecting reactions that no longer live in your system. They'll try to pull you into old patterns that don't exist anymore. They'll offer advice for problems you've already resolved internally. And at first, this can feel deeply isolating, not because you've become better than anyone else, but because you're making decisions from a fundamentally different place. You're choosing from peace instead of panic. You're responding from clarity instead of wounds. You're acting from alignment rather than anxiety. And not everyone is tuned to that frequency. This isn't metaphorical. Frequency is real. Everything vibrates. Thoughts vibrate. Emotions vibrate. Beliefs vibrate. And when you've done the work, you've done your baseline frequency shifts. You are literally operating on a different wavelength now. Just as a radio cannot play two stations at once, you cannot sustain resonance with frequencies that no longer match your own. This is where confusion often arises. When relationships start to feel uncomfortable, people assume something has gone wrong. They worry they become cold, judgmental, distant. But that isn't what's happening. What's happening is physics. You've tuned yourself to a different station, and trying to maintain connection with incompatible frequencies creates static exhaustion and internal dissonance. Some relationships will recalibrate. The people who genuinely care about your evolution will celebrate what they see unfolding in you. They'll appreciate that you're no longer carrying everyone's emotional weight. They'll value the version of you that is present instead of perpetually anxious, grounded instead of reactive. These are the people who will rise with you, who will do their own work to meet you where you are. These relationships deepen. They become cleaner, more honest, more nourishing. Other relationships, however, may feel strained or painful. People who are accustomed to your constant availability may struggle when you begin to set boundaries. Those who benefited from your people-pleasing may feel unsettled when you decline without over-explaining. Connections built around shared complaints or mutual avoidance may lose their glue when you're no longer interested in living at that frequency. This is not a failure of compassion. It is a natural consequence of growth. And this is where the real test appears, not in dramatic moments, but in subtle ones. In the text, you don't answer immediately. In the request, you decline without guilt. In the conversation, you choose not to engage in. In the invitation, you turn down because it no longer aligns with your energy. These small moments are where your new foundation either strengthens or fractures. They are where you choose yourself or abandon yourself. They determine whether your transformation is embodied or merely conceptual. The pressure here is quiet but persistent. The pull to contract back into who you were so others can feel comfortable. The temptation to shrink yourself to a familiar size. The urge to apologize for your growth, to soften it, to minimize it so no one feels left behind. But you can't unsee what you've seen. You can't unknow what you now understand about your own capacity. You can't forget what it feels like to trust yourself at this level. Trying to return to old patterns would be like squeezing into clothes you outgrew years ago, possible perhaps, but deeply uncomfortable and entirely unnecessary. You have outgrown those patterns because they no longer fit the person you are. And here is something that may challenge you. The discomfort you feel when people push back against your boundaries is not a sign you're doing something wrong. It's data. It's information. It reveals who in your life is invested in your evolution and who was invested in your limitation. That information can be painful, but it is invaluable. When you live from your new foundation, certain things naturally fall away. You stop tolerating what once drained you. You stop explaining yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You stop participating in dynamics that require you to betray yourself. You stop pretending that familiar behaviors are acceptable just because they're known. And that shift creates reactions, especially in those who benefited from your old patterns. Some people will feel threatened. Some will feel abandoned. Some will accuse you of becoming selfish, arrogant, or distant. You need to understand this clearly. Their reaction is not about you. It is about losing access to a version of you that met their needs at the expense of your own. It is about confronting their discomfort with change. Your growth becomes a mirror, and not everyone wants to look. This is where you get to practice something the old version of you found terrifying, allowing people to be disappointed without assuming responsibility for their disappointment, holding your boundaries steady even when they're tested, remaining true to your understanding of yourself even when it inconveniences others. This isn't cruelty, it's integrity. It's the difference between being kind and being self-erasing. This freedom is not loud or dramatic. It is quiet and steady, free from managing everyone else's emotions, free from the belief that your worth is tied to how much you sacrifice, free from the conditioning that taught you to shrink so others could feel secure. What emerges from this freedom is something profoundly beautiful: relationships built on mutual respect instead of obligation, connection instead of dependency. These relationships feel spacious, honest, alive. There is room for difference without threat, for boundaries without punishment, for growth without guilt. And as you continue to live from this place, your world reorganizes around you, not because you force it to, but because coherence attracts coherence. You become a stabilizing presence, a grounded force, someone whose very way of being invites truth. You are not here to be understood by everyone. You are here to be aligned with yourself. The reaction wood inside you will continue to strengthen as you honor this alignment. And with every storm you meet from this place, you will discover what the tree already knows. You were never meant to remain unchanged. You were meant to become more capable, more rooted, more fully yourself. Connections begin to feel different now. They celebrate authenticity instead of rewarding performance. You notice that interactions no longer require you to contort yourself to manage impressions or to constantly read the room for approval. Instead, they leave you feeling energized, expanded, more yourself than before. You walk away from conversations feeling nourished rather than drained, affirmed rather than diminished. This isn't coincidence. It's resonance. As you stabilize in this new internal frequency, you naturally start attracting people who operate from the same place you've grown into. People who have done their own internal work. People who understand that healthy relationships are not about rescue completion or emotional extraction, but about two whole individuals consciously choosing to share space, presence, and experience. There is less need to explain yourself, less friction in being understood, because you are finally being met at your new altitude. The work you've done on yourself, the growing, the grieving, the healing you've patiently alchemized, becomes magnetic in ways you could never manufacture. Not because you're trying to attract anything, but because you're no longer leaking energy by pretending to be someone else. You're operating as your authentic self, and authenticity has a remarkable quality. It calls in exactly what belongs in your field while effortlessly repelling what doesn't. You don't have to push things away anymore. They simply fall out of resonance. You become like a tuning fork. You only vibrate with what matches you. This shift you're experiencing, this quiet recognition that you are beyond the hardest part, is the movement from unconscious transmission to conscious broadcasting. Before, you were being shaped by the field around you, reacting to circumstances, absorbing the emotional weather of others. Now you are becoming the field itself. Your presence carries coherence. Your state sets the tone. Think about how this works. When you are operating from old patterns, wounds, conditioning, survival strategies, you were sending out a very specific signal into the world. And that signal attracted matching frequencies, people who needed saving situations that required sacrifice, dynamics that reinforced your smallness. You weren't broken. You were coherent with where you were. But now your signal has changed. You're broadcasting something entirely different, and reality responds accordingly. This is not abstract philosophy. This is quantum mechanics expressed through lived experience. The observer effect, the principle that observation changes what is observed, plays out in every interaction you have. When you hold yourself as powerful, worthy, and transform, the field collapses into experiences that reflect that self-observation. When you know yourself as someone who has already passed the hardest part, someone who has already survived and integrated their initiation, reality reorganizes around that knowing. It has no alternative. Your days start feeling fundamentally different, not because every external circumstance has suddenly improved, but because your internal landscape has been rebuilt from the ground up. You wake up with curiosity instead of dread. You approach challenges with interest instead of fear. Uncertainty no longer feels like a threat. It feels like an open field. You meet each moment from groundedness instead of reactivity. The inner voice that once dominated, critical, doubting, endlessly spiraling, still appears from time to time. But it is no longer in charge. It has been joined by something stronger, steadier, more truthful. A voice that feels less like commentary and more like recognition. A voice that sounds like wisdom and feels like coming home. It knows who you are beneath the conditioning, beneath the stories, beneath the fear. This voice doesn't shout. It doesn't argue or force or demand. It speaks in quiet certainty rather than loud anxiety. It guides with clarity instead of criticism. It operates from trust instead of terror. And the more you listen to it, the more you attune to it, the more it becomes your default frequency. Eventually, it's no longer a voice you consult. It's simply who you are. If this message has found you now, it's because you're ready to stop questioning whether you've truly changed and start trusting what you already know at the deepest level. You are beyond the hardest part. The version of you that used to fragment under pressure, that needed every detail figured out before taking a step, that waited for permission to live authentically, that version served an essential purpose. It got you here, but it is not who you are anymore. You've transcended that identity, not by rejecting it, but by integrating it. The external world hasn't suddenly become calm. Storms still move through your life. There are still curveballs, uncertainty, moments that test your understanding of yourself. But you are different now. You are someone who can stand in the center of chaos and still know who you are. Someone who can face the unknown without trying to dominate or control it into submission. Someone who understands that peace is not a reward granted by perfect circumstances, but an internal state you carry regardless of what's happening around you. This is what's wild about the place you've reached. The challenges don't stop. Difficulty doesn't disappear. The world doesn't suddenly become gentle, but your relationship to all of it changes completely. Where you once felt victimized by circumstances, you now feel curious about what they're revealing. Where you once collapsed under pressure, you now expand into it. Where you once resisted difficulty, you now meet it with interest, not because you enjoy suffering, but because you understand something fundamental: growth lives inside challenge. Pressure creates diamonds. Resistance creates strength. Transformation happens where comfort ends. This is the consciousness shift most people never make. They spend their lives waiting for external conditions to change before allowing themselves to feel okay. They postpone peace, telling themselves they'll be happy when they get the job, the relationship, the recognition, the security. And they wait their entire lives. You've seen through that illusion. You've realized that transformation must happen internally first, that you have to become someone who embodies peace before peace can appear externally. You've discovered that you don't need anything outside yourself to feel whole. You don't need validation to know your worth. You don't need perfection to experience calm. Everything you were searching for has always existed within you. It was never missing. It was simply waiting for you to stop outsourcing your sense of self long enough to notice it. And now that you have, there's no going back. Not because you're trapped, but because you're free. From this place, life becomes an ongoing dialogue instead of a battle. You listen more. You react less. You move with intention rather than compulsion. You trust your timing. You trust your instincts. You trust yourself. And that trust changes everything. To remain in this conversation about what it truly means to embody your power, you have to recognize something fundamental. You've already crossed the threshold. You have moved from merely surviving to genuinely living, from reacting unconsciously to responding with awareness, from hoping you might be strong enough to knowing without hesitation that you already are. That knowing is not fragile. The foundation you built through every challenge you endured, every moment that tested you, is not going anywhere. It's permanent now. It belongs to you. You earned it in the moments no one applauded, in the times you refused to let pain define you, in every decision to expand instead of contract, to stay present instead of disappearing, to trust yourself even when no one else did. And once you truly recognize that the hardest part is behind you, that the transformation has already happened, at the core level, something profound shifts. You stop waiting for permission to fully inhabit who you're becoming. You stop apologizing for taking up space. You stop shrinking to make others comfortable. You stop playing small because you remember what it feels like to be fully alive, fully present, fully yourself. The people around you may not understand this shift immediately. Some may resist it. Some may try to pull you back into familiar patterns because your growth challenges something unresolved in them. But that is not your responsibility. Your responsibility is to honor what you've lived through, to respect the journey that shaped you, to trust the wisdom you've earned, and to embody the frequency you've accessed. When you do this, you become a living example of what's possible. You become proof that transformation is not theoretical. It's real. It's embodied. It's available. But being proof doesn't look the way most people expect. It isn't about preaching or explaining your evolution. It isn't about announcing how much you've changed or convincing others to follow your path. You become proof simply by being, by showing up grounded, by responding to chaos with calm, by meeting difficulty with grace, by staying centered when everything around you is reactive and volatile. People don't need to hear about your transformation. They need to feel it. They sense it when their usual tactics no longer work on you, when you don't bend under pressure or chase approval, when you don't become defensive, desperate, or reactive. That sensing plants a seed. It shows them another way of being. It gives them permission, often unconsciously, to consider doing their own work. This is where community begins to matter deeply, because the more people who embody this truth, the more the collective field shifts. The more we normalize living from wisdom instead of wounds, alignment instead of anxiety, trust instead of fear. Every time you choose a new pattern over an old one, you are not just changing your own life. Every time you hold a boundary instead of collapsing it, every time you trust yourself instead of abandoning yourself, you send a ripple into the collective field. You signal that something different is possible, that healing can be lived, not just talked about. These ripples reach people you may never meet. They influence situations you may never see. This is the quiet responsibility of transformation, not to save everyone, not to fix anyone, not to prove anything, but to embody your truth so fully that it becomes undeniable. Holding your frequency steady, even when others try to pull you back into who you used to be, is part of this responsibility. And here's the surprising part: this gets easier over time, not harder. The more you practice choosing yourself, the more natural it becomes. The more you honor your boundaries, the less guilt you feel. The more you trust your intuition, the clearer it speaks. Alignment strengthens with use, like a muscle. At first, it can feel uncomfortable, even destabilizing, but eventually it becomes your baseline. You begin to notice patterns you once missed. Red flags become obvious instead of confusing. You trust your first instinct instead of negotiating against it. You say no without guilt and yes without resentment. You operate from a clarity that once felt unreachable. And this clarity isn't about having everything figured out. It's not about certainty or control. It's about trusting yourself to move through uncertainty. It's knowing you don't need all the answers to take the next step. You only need to trust that you have what this moment requires. Living like someone who has already won doesn't mean life becomes effortless. It means you stop wasting energy on battles that don't matter. You stop trying to prove yourself to people who cannot see you. You stop chasing validation and start honoring resonance. You invest your time, energy, and presence where there is mutual respect, growth, and authenticity. You allow what doesn't align to fall away without forcing or bitterness. From this place, your choices become cleaner. Your movements become intentional. You no longer operate from urgency or fear of missing out. You trust timing. You trust yourself. You trust the unfolding. Peace becomes less of a fleeting state and more of a steady undercurrent. Not because life is perfect, but because you are no longer at war with it. And here's the truth beneath all of this: the hardest part really is behind you. The breaking point has passed. The collapse you feared didn't end you. It revealed you. You are standing in your power now, whether you fully recognize it yet or not. From this foundation, there is no ceiling on what you can create, who you can become, or the reality you can step into. The transformation has already happened. Now the work is simpler, though not always easier, to live it, to embody it, to trust it. To let your external world catch up to the internal shift you've already made. You don't need to fight anymore. You don't need to prove anything. You've already won. Living like someone who knows they've won means moving with dignity, discernment, and depth. It means choosing presence over performance, truth over comfort, alignment over approval. You are no longer becoming this person. You are remembering them. And everything that comes next is simply the unfolding of that remembrance into form. It means you stop explaining your choices to people who are not invested in understanding them. Not out of arrogance, not out of defensiveness, but out of clarity. You realize that explanation is only meaningful when there is genuine curiosity on the other side. When there isn't, explanation becomes a form of self-betrayal, a quiet way of asking for permission to be who you already are. Living from alignment means you no longer hand over your inner authority to external approval. You let your actions speak, and you let your peace be enough. It means you stop waiting for the perfect moment and recognize that every moment becomes perfect when you are operating from your truth. You understand that timing is not something you find. It is something you create by showing up fully. The right time was never somewhere in the future. It has always been now, disguised as uncertainty, disguised as fear, disguised as readiness. You thought you still had to earn. When you trust yourself, you stop postponing your life. Living like someone who has already won means you approach each day from abundance, instead of scarcity, from possibility, instead of limitation, from curiosity, instead of fear. You are no longer scanning the horizon for threats or measuring yourself against imagined standards. You move through your days with an openness that says, "Let me see what is possible here," rather than, "How do I protect myself from what might go wrong?" That shift alone changes how reality meets you. It means you stop asking, "What if I fail?" and start asking, "What if I succeed beyond my wildest expectations?" Not as naive optimism, but as a genuine reorientation of your inner dialogue. You understand that fear has been asking the wrong questions all along. You realize that the cost of never fully trying is far greater than the cost of failing and learning. And once you see that clearly, hesitation loosens its grip. It means you stop protecting yourself from disappointment and start opening yourself to delight. You recognize that numbness was never safety. It was just a quieter form of pain. You allow yourself to feel again, to want again, to hope again, knowing that vulnerability is not a weakness, but a doorway. You choose aliveness over armor. Here's the final truth that brings everything together. The hardest part was never the external challenges you faced. It wasn't the relationships that ended, the losses you endured, or the failures you experienced. Those were painful, yes, but they were not the core work. The hardest part was learning to stop abandoning yourself, learning to stop betraying your own knowing, learning to stop sacrificing your truth for someone else's comfort. That was the real threshold, and you crossed it. You did the work of coming back to yourself. You learned the lesson that no external success can compensate for internal abandonment. You earned the wisdom that comes only from lived experience, from choosing yourself again and again, when it would have been easier not to. And now you get to experience what it feels like to live in full alignment with yourself. You wake up each day knowing you are not betraying yourself anymore. You move through your life with the quiet confidence that you are on your own side. You face challenges with the deep assurance that no matter what happens, you will not disappear from yourself to survive it. That alone changes everything. Something profound happens when you reach this level of self-trust. Your entire relationship with time shifts. You stop living in the future, constantly rehearsing what might go wrong. You stop living in the past, endlessly replaying what already did. You begin to live in the present moment, fully inhabiting your own life, fully available to what is actually happening right now. And that presence changes how you experience reality. Most people are rarely present. They're physically here, but mentally elsewhere. They eat meals while planning tomorrow. They sit with loved ones while replaying yesterday. They move through their lives on autopilot, skimming the surface of their own existence. But you have learned something different. You have learned that the present moment is the only place where your power exists. It is the only place where choice is possible. It is the only place where life is actually unfolding. This is why the hardest part is behind you, because you have learned how to be here. You have learned how to stay instead of escape, how to inhabit your life instead of constantly avoiding it through worry, regret, or distraction. This presence allows transformation not just to happen, but to stick. It integrates change into your nervous system, into your patterns, into the way you meet the world. Healing stops being an idea and becomes a lived state. Think about how much energy you used to spend trying to control things that were never yours to control. How much mental bandwidth you wasted running scenarios that never happened. How much emotional capacity you burned managing other people's reactions, moods, and expectations. All of that energy has returned to you now. All of that power is back in your system. Your life force is no longer leaking outward. And what do you do with it? You create. You build. You express. You contribute. You become someone who is not just healed but generative. Not just recovered but expansive. Not just surviving but thriving in ways that quietly inspire others to believe they can do the same. This is the stage of transformation that few people talk about. Everyone focuses on the breakdown, the dark night, the pain and confusion. But far fewer talk about what comes after the rebuilding. The emergence, the moment you step into a version of yourself you never even knew was possible. You are not who you thought you would become. You are better. You are deeper, more grounded, more real. You are more aligned and more powerful in the ways that actually matter. Not power over others, but power with yourself. Not power to control outcomes, but power to respond to whatever arrives with grace, discernment, and trust. And here's what is remarkable about this place you have reached. You are not finished. You are not done growing. But you are also no longer broken. You are no longer fragmented or lost. You have found the ground beneath your feet. You have located the center within yourself. You have accessed the part of you that was never damaged in the first place. Some call this your higher self. Some call it your soul. Some call it consciousness or the observer. The name does not matter. What matters is that you have made contact with it. You have learned to hear its voice and trust its guidance. You have built a relationship with the part of you that is steady, wise, and intact. That connection is what makes you unstoppable. When you are rooted in that place, you stop being driven by external circumstances. You stop being manipulated by other people's emotions. You stop being controlled by your own fear. You become like a mountain-rooted stable, unshakable. Storms can rage. Winds can howl. Rain can pour. And still you remain centered. This does not mean you stop feeling. In many ways, you feel more deeply than before. But you are no longer consumed by your emotions. You are no longer identified with them. You can experience fear without becoming fear. You can feel sadness without drowning in it. You can feel anger without letting it take over. This is emotional sovereignty. This is maturity. This is what it looks like to be a human being who has done their work. And the world needs this from you. The world needs people who have faced their shadows, integrated their wounds, and learned to trust themselves. It needs people who can stay calm in chaos, speak truth in confusion, and hold space when everything feels unstable. Not because you are perfect or enlightened, but because you are grounded. Because you know how to struggle consciously. Because you know how to fall apart without losing yourself. That is the transformation. That is the shift. That is the threshold you have crossed. Everything that unfolds from here is simply life reflecting back the truth you finally claimed, that you are worthy, capable, and enough exactly as you are in this moment. The hardest part is behind you. What lies ahead may not always be easier, but it will be different. Lighter, more honest, more joyful, more aligned with who you actually are instead of who you thought you had to be. You are safer now, not because nothing difficult will ever happen again, but because you trust yourself to meet whatever does. You know you can survive. You know you can adapt. You know you can grow. You have proven it to yourself through lived experience, and that proof cannot be taken away. So welcome to the other side. Welcome to life after the hardest part. Welcome to the version of yourself you fought to become. You earned this. Every moment of peace, every moment of joy, every moment of alignment that is coming your way. You earned the right to trust yourself, to love yourself, to live as yourself without apology or explanation. The hardest part is behind you, and what comes next is finally yours to live.